I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the E2E COVID-19 Survival Toolkit series, and today we're going to talk about bootstrapping. We've got some great examples on at the RIC Centre of startups that we've been working with over the last half dozen years that have bootstrapped to scale to multi-million-dollar or even higher valuations. We're going to talk a little bit about that generically, but then also introduce you to two great entrepreneurs who are going to talk about their bootstrapping to scale today. My name is Paul Barter. I'm an entrepreneur in residence at the RIC Centre, and this speaker series is intended to share targeted tips from tech experts with practical insights and stories from the front lines. We're pleased to host this session in partnership with other innovation hubs in Ontario, including Hall Tech, Innovation Factory, Innovate Niagara, Innovation Guelph, Tech Alliance, and WeTech. The speakers today are both successful CEOs, and they will be sharing their bootstrapping stories from a software and also from a hardware perspective. After we hear from both presenters, we'll open up the discussion with all participants through chat. Starting out is Sam Vasa. He's the CEO of PaymentEvolution, and following him will be Andy Hank, CEO of Aviron Interactive, and they're both going to feature their stories on bootstrapping. So at this point in time, we're going to turn the tables over to Sam and let him tell his story. Over to you, Sam.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. Really excited to kind of participate today, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Sam Vasa. I'm a co-founder and CEO of PaymentEvolution, which is a provider of payroll and payment services in Canada. Let me, if it's okay with the audience today, I kind of want to give you a little backdrop about our company, and then I want to talk about kind of bootstrapping in general, if that makes sense. So, put simply, at PaymentEvolution, we pay people. We process payroll for employees. We manage benefit plans. We ensure that vendor payments are done on time, and we move billions of dollars for literally thousands of Canadian businesses across this great country of ours. We're also an innovation leader. In 2008, we were one of the first in Canada with the cloud payroll service. We introduced integrated payments shortly thereafter, no file uploads or messy banking integration that was required. And then we democratized access to online financial data for all employees, giving every small business owner a powerful employee self-service tool in a tool that we call Paychecker. When we saw that a disproportionate number of employees who were paid through services like ours in the SMB space resorted to payday loans, we actually introduced a new product called Wages on Demand, which gave employees access to their earnings before their traditional pay date. Later, when we saw that 79% of small businesses in Canada didn't offer health and dental benefits to their staff, we introduced Canada's first real-time benefits quoting and management service. We took a process that was pretty opaque and hidden behind weeks of paperwork, and we made it an instant service in partnership with some of the largest insurance carriers in Canada. And when recently the COVID-19 pandemic started affecting our small business clients, we actually deployed our HR experts to help. Within days, we crafted pandemic policies, furlough guidelines, and provided expert assistance to help these companies kind of navigate through the difficult employment decisions that they had facing them. We even made applying for the 75% Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy simple through just a one-click report, saving countless hours, I think, of administrative work for small business owners and their staff. It's that singular focus on helping small businesses that keeps our team quite motivated. While we work with thousands of Canadian businesses, we also support a large network of financial professionals who assist these businesses. Bookkeepers, accountants, rely on PE to help them create an accurate payroll and process on-time vendor payments for these companies. We work with some of the largest financial institutions, and in some cases, like credit unions, we are tied right into the online banking experience, helping dramatically reduce the payment transit times for high-value payments. We also integrate with some of the best financial tools you use to run your business. And maybe you've heard of some of these, whether it's Intuit's QuickBooks or Xero or even our own Canadian FreshBooks. We ensure that your payroll, vendor payments, and other finances are accurately recorded. So I gave you that as a quick little backdrop to kind of why we're all really here, which is to talk about bootstrapping or creating an indie business. PaymentEvolution, we're fully self-financed. We have not taken any investments from outside the company and have instead relied on our own capital to sustain and scale the business. And if I can truly be open, being self-financed wasn't actually our first choice. In fact, when we first started the company, we were, I was mesmerized by the funds that were raised by a lot of these other startups. Perhaps maybe, you can relate. You've probably seen lots of Series A announcements in TechCrunch and BetaKit. But how many stories have you actually read about a successful self-financed startup? There's this whole culture, if you will, around you must raise money, and that gets beaten into us as entrepreneurs. Our journey to raise funds actually brought me quite close to the VC community, and maybe to help us kind of through the conversation today, I thought it might be useful to dig a little bit deeper into the VC model, and really at a point trying to answer a question like, how do these VCs actually make money? And I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. It's not how you think. So let's take a typical average VC fund with about $100 million to invest. I think it's kind of romantic to think about VCs as being self-made, and now that they have all this capital, they're just ready to go back into the market and help other entrepreneurs invest. The reality is, for most VCs, this isn't their own money. In fact, most venture capitalists get their money from what I'll call limited partners, who are usually just large investors like banks or institutions, pension funds, or university endowments. It's these limited partners that are driven to kind of exceed market returns. They could invest in pretty safe instruments like real estate, blue chip equities, or whatever, but what they're really looking for is something that could safely return something that's higher than 7 or 8% per year. And when we look at these limited partners, typically they're looking to invest so that they can get something a little bit higher than that. For them, 12% return on their money is good, and anything below that, well, honestly, it's not really quite worth the risk that they're willing to take, but especially when there are safer investments out there. So for our hypothetical VC fund, let's assume that we want a 12% return to help these limited partners out. We all know that investing in a startup won't create an exit annually. So most VC funds actually have a 10-year horizon in which to deliver an exit. While these funds may only actively be investing for 3 to 5 years, they have about those 10 years to return the funds to their limited partners. Now, some newer funds have 12 to 14-year horizons, but maybe to make our math a little bit simpler, let's assume our $100 million VC fund has this time horizon. Okay, so let's do a little bit of the back of the envelope calculation. If we need to show 12% annually for 10 years, this means that the fund needs to return quite a bit. So welcome to the world of compound interest. So for the fund to really be attractive to the limited partners, it needs, and to be considered above average, it needs to return at least 3x over those 10 years. Okay, so I hope everybody's following so far. Okay, good. All right, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Let's assume this fund invests in 10 companies. Over the course of the fund's life, they all exit at $50 million. Okay, yes, that's a pretty awesome outcome for any startup. And to bat 1,000 and to have all 10 return that in 10 years, that's actually quite simply amazing. But let's say that typically VCs invest for about 15 to 20% of the equity at each round that they go through. For our average fund that we're talking about today, let's assume they participate in the first and second rounds and end up with about 25% of the equity of each of the startups in their cohort here. So if we do the math, the VC would then return 12.5 million each on each. So that's 10 times 12.5 million, about 125 million over the 10-year life of that fund. But if you remember what I said before, we actually needed 300 million, $100 million fund, 3x return, 300 million. So that's not actually pretty good. So let's actually give them some better odds. Let's go ahead and assume that we actually have 5 that are sold at 50 million. So 12.5 million return on each, And the other 5 actually did much better and pulled off $100 million exits. The founders are overnight millionaires, and their pictures are featured in BetaKit, and they've become so popular that there's a subreddit dedicated to the new founder mafia that emerged. The VC, well, actually, if we do the math, it's not so cool. 5 times 12.5 million plus another 5 times 25 million, that's only $187.5 million. So the VC return on this one is still not quite where we need it to be. Let's go ahead and let's take our previous example and do something a little bit better. Let's make one of the companies a star. So that 10th company, instead of selling for 100 million, now actually sells for 500 million. So our original 5 still sell for 50, 4 sell at 100, and our new one at 500 million. And now our VC, if we kind of just run through the numbers, has returned $287.5 million. So we're almost there. So just a little bit more and maybe kind of take it from there. The problem, I guess, so far, if you're following along, is we're assuming that every startup is succeeding in this cohort. In fact, the reality is most don't survive, even VC-funded ones. So let's create a more realistic example. Let's have 5 of the startups fail and return nothing. 3 exit at 25 million, 1 exit at 200 million, and let's actually be quite generous here. Let's create a unicorn. We'll have our 10th company do a $1 billion exit, and let's see what the math returns on this one. 5 at 0, 3 at 6 million, 1 at 50, 1 at 250. So that's $318 million. Okay, so that's pretty much what needs to happen if a VC fund is going to return the capital that the limited partners really need. Okay, so it's a lot of work, and they actually need to have a unicorn in every single one of their funds to make that work. That's pretty improbable. So how do the rest of the VCs out there make ends meet? You know, they're obviously not all generating unicorns. The truth is they're not making ends meet on their investing prowess, but rather on the fees that their investors pay, these limited partners. Most VCs are well and primarily compensated from the 2% annual fee on the committed capital that they charge their investors. So on that $100 million fund, that's about $2 million per year in fees. So just a fun side note, that $100 million fund needs to set aside $20 million over the 10 years just to pay the management fees. So the fund only really invests about $80 million with an expected outcome of $300 million. So even when they don't generate those great returns, and quite frankly, most don't, the personal compensation of the VCs is guaranteed from that fee stream. VCs are really, in my mind, glorified mutual funds with just a riskier underlying portfolio. So let's actually, for fun, why don't we compare their cost structure to mutual funds? If you've all heard of Vanguard, if you're an investor, if you haven't, they operate some of the most efficient mutual funds out there. Vanguard has a typical expense ratio of 10 basis points. That's 1/10 of 1%. The mutual fund industry as a whole has an average expense ratio of just 57 basis points. The reality is VC funds are dramatically more expensive. And so that's kind of the key here. So now that we've looked at the VC side of the equation, let's take a look at the founder. According to Fred Wilson, who's of Union Square Ventures, he's a New York-based VC firm, it will generally take about 3 or 4 rounds of equity capital to finance a business. With 20 to 25% of the company, you have to allocate to recruit and retain a management team. 55 to 60% is allocated for investors, angel all the way through late stage VC. That leaves the founder or the founding team with only about 10 to 20% of the business at exit. Or said a different way, dilution is a bitch. If we use our previous example and assume you have an average exit of about 50 million, that leaves the founding team with about $5 million to split. With like a typical 2-person founding team, you'll have earned approximately $250K, or about what the average developer at Google makes. By most measures, that's a decent outcome, but I'll kind of leave it to your decision if that's enough of a motivator to go through the motions of raising capital. So let me pause and just kind of say, I hope that was a useful exercise just to peel back the onion a bit and take a look inside a typical VC fund. So what did we do at PE? Early on, we felt that raising funds would help us attract the right talent. Canadian VCs to this day are famously still risk averse. And back in 2008, when we first started, we knew that they certainly were at that point too. I spent a lot of my time building decks, pitching as well, and even taking advantage of some of the great resources at the RIC Centre to kind of hone our message. I made some trips to San Francisco. I participated in pitch events. I even met with potential US investors. What I didn't realize was that my pitch, which was building enterprise quality employee management tools for SMBs, it didn't have a key ingredient, which was unrealistic spending. The VCs I spoke with wanted us to spend and to scale rapidly, something we knew would actually be a giant mistake, which was born out of our experience with converting clients on our existing platform. So after a number of no's, we made a conscious decision not to fundraise. This, to be quite honest, instantly freed up a lot of my time and the time of our management team to focus on what we really needed to make us successful, acquiring new business clients. During a fundraise, a founder will typically spend 80 to 90% of their time wooing potential investors. Anything less won't give you the funnel you need to actually land in the right investors before your capital runs out. And I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, could that time be better used to acquire more customers? Could I increase my own runway by acquiring new clients and build a more sustainable business? Getting to sustainability, however, wasn't truly easy for us. The reality in our market of selling to SMBs is that you need a really well-scoped and super friendly product to get product market fit. That's not cheap, especially when you are inventing new ways to do things like new rules engines, new payment engines, new analytics. Like this all takes time and you need capital to keep running the business. So about 18 months into our mission, we landed on a new strategy to help us fund the company. And instead of trying to win over Canadian SMBs just en masse with our product as it stood at that time, we pivoted to building an early product with limited appeal, maybe more specifically for those higher paying customers. And if I say it a different way, we kind of landed the whale. This was for a specific client, an early high-paying accounting firm. We built a hosted payroll calculator for them. And we used the experience with them to learn, but also to really kind of bolster our finances. This gave us kind of the much needed breathing room, if you will, financially, so that we could tackle building a more broadly appealing payroll service for the broader Canadian small business community. We used the funds to continue building out our broad market payroll SMB service. And today, I kind of see a lot of firms adopting this kind of methodology of running their business. Take a second and just Google market-driven innovation and Tesla, and I think you'll see that this is the kind of hustle you need if you really want to succeed as an entrepreneur. Now, I think I've mentioned a couple times, like we've never taken outside funding, and this decision has kept us honest and really focused on building a profitable and repeatable service with a lot of appeal to the small business owners. It's more importantly allowed us to take a long-term view on success and not chase the short-term returns that some companies have at the expense of kind of our mission. This, to be quite honest, completely runs against what VCs were telling me in my early days when we first started. I often heard comments like, hey, you need to scale this super rapid. You need to overspend on advertising now to attract a lot of clients, and you need to find some superstar developers, and it'll take a lot of money to do so. But my favorite comment that I heard was, you need to blitz scale. If you're not familiar with it, blitz scaling is a term popularized by Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn and now a VC at Greylock. It's a euphemism for spend like crazy. This is exactly what an investor wants to see you do: spend capital, scale fast, exit within the life of their fund, 10 years. But honestly, I don't think you need to get caught in the competition vortex of spending a lot. Investors will tell you to spend it on Google or Facebook ads. And in fact, you can avoid it. You can use low or no cost customer acquisition techniques, guest blogs, sharing content, creating partnerships like we did with a lot of accounting firms, referrals, even nurturing advocates and fans. Like this will help you manage your finances without blitz scaling or overspending. For us at PE, our path to success without having to blitz scale starts with like limited and, quite frankly, some expensive services that were only appealing to a handful of high-paying customers, and that underwrote our commoditization of the service for a lot of the companies that we service today. So the obvious question is, how do you fund your company if you decide to avoid fundraising? For us at PE, it's been a simple realization. We fund the company with customer dollars. And I'll completely admit that it's easy to say that and super hard to do, but it's a strategy that we chose, and it works certainly well in our market. There are a few key tenets on how we manage this. First, we have a budget. This means we know how much we're going to allocate to wages, to marketing, to productivity tools, and anything else that we kind of need to run our business. The simple process, quite honestly, of building a budget and tracking your spend weekly will help you get a really good handle on your business. Second, we typically don't take on debt. And I think there are obvious exceptions on when you might need to do this, but we strive to never have debt carry over from year to year. And our third, the budget and our preference to avoid debt creates this really cool environment where our revenue must sustain and scale the business. This means we operate on this new and really cool way of running a business. It means that we only spend what we make. Okay, I know that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it truly works for our company. And I'll be honest and say it's really liberating to run a business this way. As a management team, it means that we can truly focus in on longer-term projects. We can do multi-year investments. It would honestly be quite difficult to justify to an investor who wants out in just a few short years. So that's kind of how we've approached building what we do. We're bootstrapped, we're indie, we're built on customer dollars. And I think mainly just to close out and to share a couple more things, I thought I'd share a little bit on the tooling stuff that we've used to kind of run our business. Early stage, and I know many of you are early stage, it's really about saving that money and making sure that you pump that into wages or finding the right talent so you can scale. We didn't spend a lot of money. We created shared inboxes for customer support. We did settle on a great financial management tool called Xero to manage our finances. I would say if you're early stage, invest in that because you do need to make sure that you're on top of your finances, create that budget, etc. We got pretty serious about sending out email campaigns and communicating with our customer base. We settled on MailChimp for that. And we ate our own dog food. We actually used PaymentEvolution to pay ourselves and to pay our staff and for managing our own employees. But quite honestly, at early stage, it's just a lot of duct tape and shoe leather. It's rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work that is necessary to scale. As you kind of grow the business and you get into more of a consistent revenue stream, you're going to want to start standardizing on some higher value tools that'll automate some things for you. For us, customer service is a huge component of how we go to market. So we invested in Zendesk for customer support. We're investing now in CRM, Dynamics, and to help us not only with the customer side of keeping the data, but also the marketing automation piece. And as we have scaled, we've scaled in using our own tool set to manage our benefits, the HR, vendor payments, everything else that we would need on that. Lastly, I do want to take a second and say, if you want to dig deeper into building a business this way, there are some really cool resources that I could recommend. The Blitz Scaling Toolkit by Reid Hoffman is a great insight into kind of like a Sun Tzu, know your enemy kind of way that shows you how your overfunded competitors are trying to scale. Knowing how your peers are zigging will show you how to zag. It's kind of a great and short read. Neil Patel, he's an amazing marketer. You've probably seen some of his stuff. His definitive guide is a great primer on how to hustle and scale. And if you're curious about how some companies manage their finances, I think you'd want to take a look at a company that actually bought out their own investors. This is Buffer. And lastly, if you kind of want an inside baseball view on the VC world, I would recommend listening to the Acquired podcast. They have this brilliant storytelling kind of methodology and a highly active Slack community if you want to network with other entrepreneurs. So I'm Sam Vasa. I hope this perspective was helpful and has you at least thinking about how to build your business a different way. And if you do decide to postpone raising, let me know. I'd love to hear your story. And I will say, and I hope Paul doesn't mind me saying this, if you do email me, I'll invest in you. I'll pay for your first year subscription of PaymentEvolution. And at least hope you get you started along your way. So I thank you, and I hope at least this got you thinking.
Sam, that was fabulous. I really appreciate it, and good for you for the ask at the end there. We're going to ask you to hang around, and we're going to turn the screen over to Andy from Aviron Technologies next. So he's going to give you a slightly earlier stage and slightly different point of view about starting bootstrapping his business, and then we're going to set some time aside at the end to do Q&A with both of you. So Andy, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. All right, let me just see if I can switch this over. And can you guys hear me all right? And see my screen?
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Paul, for introducing us. My name is Andy, and I'm the founder and CEO of Aviron Interactive. I'm going to play a short 30-second video so that you guys can kind of see and feel the product instead of me talking about it. So we're just going to jump into that right now.
Introducing Aviron. Equipped with a fully immersive 21-inch high-definition touchscreen, Aviron's state-of-the-art roller raises the bar in effective workouts. Aviron connects you in real time with people around the world. Participate in challenges individually, together as a team, or against an advanced AI system designed to bring out your best. Connected, immersive, exhilarating. Aviron. End boring workouts.
All right, so it's pretty clear we are kind of a fitness tech company similar to Peloton, but we do it with rowers and our content is a little different. A little bit more about the business, which you might not have gotten from the video, is that we are hardware and we're also software. So we're hardware because we sell these physical rowing machines, and we're software because of the content that goes on the big touchscreens. We have over 150 different workout options. It's very interactive. You get to race against people, compete with other people online, all that jazz. So we have about 9 employees at this time. And I put +9 because if you include our part-time employees, we have a little more than that. Our model is a hardware and subscription model. So we sell our product for an upfront fee, and then we charge a membership fee to get access to the software content. And to date, we've primarily been B2B into the commercial space, and that means we sell to places like gyms, hotels, condos, schools, corporate facilities, and the like. So to go into a little bit about the story of Aviron, so you have a little bit of that backstory, it came up with the idea for the business in 2016. In February 2016. By June of that year, we hired our first employee, which was an engineer. And then by the end of that year, we actually had our first prototype. And that's what you're looking at with the photo in the background. Is we worked with a lot of different manufacturers, looked for the right machine, and you can see us tinkering with that stuff in our basement. And then finally, it took a long time, and we're going to go into why it takes a long time, especially when you're bootstrapping a hardware company. But it took us about 2 years to actually launch our product into the commercial market. And today, we have resellers across the US, Canada, the UK, and France. Some of our biggest customers include Nike's corporate headquarters, the University of California, YMCA gyms. And the big news today, which Paul's well aware of, is that we actually launched a home rower. So hopefully our business, will split off between the B2B side and now into the B2C space as well. Paul, you guys hear me okay? I just want to make sure, checking in.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I can't really share with you too much about the journey or the advantages and disadvantages of bootstrapping versus raising venture-backed capital because, I never raised capital myself. But what I can share with you is kind of how I got here and a few things that I learned along the way, especially when it comes to bootstrapping. So the 4 key topics that I thought would possibly add the most value to you is acquiring capital, saving capital, being lucky, and time management. All right, so acquiring capital is still one of the most important things for any business, regardless, actually, if you're a hardware business, probably it's a lot more important because you require more capital. But regardless of whatever business you're starting, you're going to need capital. And like I said, hardware is the most expensive, and hardware is expensive, especially in our case, because when it comes to design, you have to spend a lot more money into things like prototypes and molds, inventory, buying the inventory, carrying costs of the inventory, logistics of getting the inventory here. And it's also really complicated. You got to deal with suppliers, you got to deal with damaged products and tariffs and a slew of other things that make hardware really expensive. Hardware is also slow. and being slow makes it more expensive. So it's slow to create a new product, it's slow to change a product, and it's slow to fix a product. And the faster you want to do it, the more money it's going to cost you. So this is kind of how we started off the business starting in 2016. So I want to kind of map out exactly where we got our finances and how much was required to actually start this business. So I actually had about $50,000 of my own savings when I first decided to start the business. Obviously, I saved for a couple of years knowing that I wanted to do my own thing. I had about $50,000 that I could access in terms of credit cards. And then I borrowed about $50,000 from my father. I was fortunate enough to actually have a condo downtown, and it appreciated in value, and that helped me get a home equity line of credit for about $200,000. And then after doing business with the bank for about a year, showing them that I was a sustainable business, that I was serious, they actually gave me a small line of credit of about $100,000, and now it's kind of moved up to about $125,000. And once the business started going, we acquired a little bit more capital from angel investors, which really helped to pay for things like inventory, trade shows, and ongoing costs. So that's pretty much all the money that we've raised to date. And I wanted to add the $0 for VCs, not because I want to say that we didn't raise any money from VCs. Just like Sam kind of mentioned, we tried to raise money from VCs. I've pitched at every RIC workshop. I've flown down to San Francisco and pitched to VCs. Did as many cold calls as I could. Got into a few accelerators, got into the final rounds of Y Combinator and Techstars. But to be really, I wasn't successful. I wasn't able to raise capital for a business. But what I learned along this kind of journey, and it was really, really tough journey, was that just like Sam mentioned, not raising capital doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. And what really made me realize this was I read a magazine. It's one of the magazines that I'm a really big fan of is called Inc. magazine. I highly recommend you pick up a copy. It's very inspirational and you'll learn a ton of things. But annually they have a top 5,000 fastest growing companies in the world, primarily in the US, in this magazine. And one of the things I read was that 97% of the companies that made it to the top 5,000 companies on that list were not venture-backed companies. And that really made me realize that, just like we've been talking about, you read about all these companies raising money, and that's kind of set the standard. But most companies, especially looking at this list of 5,000 really successful companies, high growth companies, most of them never raised any venture capital at all. So my advice, kind of takeaway from this slide is, if you're going to build a business, I believe you should build one that can be venture backed because it's, has potential of being successful, but count on it not being backed. So, raising capital is important, but raising capital is tough, especially because it's typically not in your control. But what is in your control, and I think is critical to every business, is finding ways to be finding ways to save as much capital as possible. So, our journey was pretty unique. We had the opportunity to build the rower from scratch, to really put in all the bells and whistles that we really wanted, build a really creative software solution that came along with the rower. But we decided that because we were bootstrapping, we need to save as much money as possible. And so instead of building our own rower, we decided to OEM that hardware from another manufacturer that built rowers from a lot of other companies. And that saved us a ton of money, also saved us a ton of time. And that allowed us to really focus on what we kind of do best today, which is we're primarily a software company. I think staying focused and being patient is another key way in which you can save capital. So when we decided to go to market, we only went into one market. We had customers that were interested in selling our product in Japan. We had customers right off the bat interested in selling our product in France. But we knew that focusing on one market was going to save capital, and being a bootstrapped company, we need to save as much as possible. And I think a lot of companies do fall into that trap where they try to do too much. So we focused on one market. We focused on one product, which is just a commercial rower. Now we have a consumer rower. And we focused on one customer, which is the commercial customer. And by staying focused and being patient, being really niche, I think was a critical way in helping us kind of get to where we are today along this bootstrap journey. The next point, which is pretty common sense, is being frugal and being creative. So my father, he has this really this one quote that I kind of really like, and it goes along the lines of, if I must spend $1 million, I will, but if I can save $1, I will. And my dad kind of taught me that, you know, you got to spend a lot of money to build a business, but if you can save any bit of money, you know, do it. A lot of people look at our business, I think, from an outside perspective, and we kind of look like we're bigger than we actually are. We don't look like we only have 9 employees. We look like maybe we have 20, 30, 50 employees, especially when you're comparing us to some of our competitors, like a Peloton that has over 2,000 employees, and you know, the long list of other competitors. And one of the ways in which, you know, we kind of have that brand is by being really frugal and being really creative with how we spend our money to maximize our return. So I'm a big proponent of things like freelancers. So one of the resources that I wanted to share with you that I hope every startup kind of uses is Upwork. And Upwork allows you to find freelancers. So when you look at our business, from our bookkeeper to our Salesforce administrator to our user interface designer to our marketing content to our social media, it's all done by freelancers that aren't in-house. That's allowed us to save a ton of money. We also have a work from home culture. You know, all 9 of our employees, none of them work in the office with me. We all work from home. We also don't own any warehouses for a hardware company. We actually use third-party logistics companies. So knowing that from the beginning there's going to be a challenge, and being frugal was really important to helping this business survive. You know, we kind of decided to not have our own warehouses and do a work from home. And it's been great. You know, there's a lot of technologies like your Teams and Slacks and Dropbox and a lot of reporting tools, Salesforce, that allow you to work effectively and efficiently and manage a team from home. All right. Be lucky. So this one doesn't apply to just companies that are trying to bootstrap. I kind of thought it's one of the things that I kind of live by. One of the things that I kind of work by, and I think it was best explained by a gentleman by the name of Haim Saban. For those of you who don't know him, he was the person that brought Power Rangers to North America. There's a great podcast on him, and the podcast is called How I Built This by Guy Raz on Haim Saban. And his story is really unique and special because he is a self-made billionaire who didn't raise any capital. He bootstrapped his way to where he is. And in the podcast, one of the things he says, or one of the things Guy Raz, the host, asks is, you know, you're really lucky. And Haim says, being lucky means having the skills to grab the luck when it is presented. And what that meant to me, and what I kind of go by, is that you need to take advantage of every opportunity to expand your network, every opportunity to learn as much as you can. So if someone offers you an opportunity to pitch, someone offers you an opportunity to speak, like I'm speaking today, to meet someone, even if it means you got to drive 2 hours, I think you should take every opportunity, because you never know where those opportunities will lead. And throughout my career at Aviron, by taking every opportunity to meet as many people as possible, to pitch every time, I've grown my network, which has really helped kind of grow this business. Finally, time management. So I believe, you know, money and cash flow is the biggest challenge with any business. You're trying not to run out of money. But the second biggest enemy to any business is time. Especially when you're bootstrapping, time is probably more valuable. You know, as a small company with only 9 employees, we're competing against really big companies with thousands of employees. And so, when you look at it from an hours, point of view, with 9 employees and each employee working on average 40 hours, you're comparing it to 2,000 people working 40 hours. We have to do so much more within the same amount of time. And we still have to look just as good as them, have the presence, have a quality product, all of the above. So one of the takeaways that I've kind of learned over the last couple of years is it's better to be going in the right general direction than it is to be going in the exact right direction. That's why I kind of have the graph of laws of diminishing returns. For our business, we try to do as much as we can within a certain amount of time so that we're 70, 80% to where we really want to be, right? We don't know if this, the way the product looks, or we'll spend, a certain amount of time on the way a product looks, but we know if we spend double the amount of time, it's going to look better, but how much better is it going to look? And kind of going by just being in the right general direction has helped us really stay ahead of the curve, stay ahead of our competitors, and not really getting lost in trying to fix all these really small problems. We're trying to improve incrementally. And that's pretty much it. So thank you everyone for listening in. I hope that was kind of useful for everyone. Here's my contact information. Like I mentioned earlier, if you reach out to me, I will 100% reach out to you as well. It's kind of how I go by. So feel free to contact me anytime. If you can, I would love for you to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you very much.
Well, Eddie, that was great, and really appreciate it. It was a similar point of view as Sam, but also a little bit different point of view. And so in combination, I think they really bring home the challenges of an entrepreneur and the successes that you both had with your organizations to date, and hopefully much more success in the future. I'm going to, at this point, we're going to try to get some questions on chat initially. And then if we don't get too much activity there, I might ask a couple of questions myself. And later on, maybe I'll be on mute and ask some questions direct. So do we have any questions on chat? So question from JT to both of you. Take your turns. How do you validate your ideas? How did you kind of basically come up with that minimum viable product?
Then you go first.
Sure. Before I get into that, Andy, props to you for running a hardware company and bootstrapping your way. Like to me, that's like next level. So congrats. That's really cool. It's a good question. How do you go ahead and validate any of the ideas that you may have as a startup? I think you're finding the product market fit and making sure that you've got a product that is attractive to your potential customer base is super important. For us at PE, I will have to admit it wasn't hard. Payroll as just kind of a function is almost a necessity for a business if you have employees, and that's the vast majority of businesses in Canada. And when our addressable market is somewhere like 1.2 million small businesses, and 98% of them are considered small businesses kind of in our bailiwick. It's pretty easy to say that we're building a product that is validated in the eyes of the entrepreneurs. The harder part, and this is the part that we spent a lot of time perfecting, was to make the product simple enough for that business owner. By that I mean, when we first came out, people were using ADP, Ceridian, these really big mainframe class kind of tools to process payroll. And what we needed was a cloud-based, web browser-based solution that automated the vast majority of that and made it super simple for these small businesses. So when we first started out, we actually started with a small cohort of businesses. We asked them if this is what they needed, and we fine-tuned with that small cohort first before going more broadly across the Canadian marketplace.
Andy, same question to you.
So my take's a little bit different. So the way we did it was, to be frank, trial and error. The product that you see today is a lot different than the first product. And I remember pitching that product to family and then our first pitches to customers. And they didn't respond the way I thought they were going to respond. And that's why I'm more about being in the right general direction, because if you just spend too much time, you spend too much time, it's going to cost you a lot of time, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Ideally, if you're a venture-backed business or you're a big business, you can put a lot of dollars into research and figuring out the best solution, the best way to do things, and that's going to validate your business. But for our business, was picking something that we're passionate about, picking a solution that we thought was or picking a problem that we thought we were solving, and then really changing it as we were going along, based on customer feedback, based on feedback we're getting from our different partners.
Question for both of you, and this is an interesting one. We have some startups that are bootstrapping, but they have to survive at the same time. So when do you make that decision to kind of give up the part-time job and go all in, or did you even do the part-time job? Did you just jump in right off the bat, or did you kind of mitigate your downsides a little bit at first?
I'll go first, and I'm not sure how many people know a little bit of my backstory, but I did not have a plan B. I was fired from Microsoft at the height of the financial crisis in 07, 08. My entire team was let go, so I did not have another option to have revenue or have an income to support my family, which I just started around the same time. So I was all in, but the question I think is kind of pertinent, because you do need to survive. You do need to have an income. You do need to pay rent or pay your mortgage or what have you. And for us, I think that's what kind of made us laser focus in on what I mentioned earlier, the market-driven innovation, finding that whale, finding that early customer that was going to subsidize kind of our longer-term initiatives. And so we spent a lot of time up front just kind of nurturing some of those things. Yes, they were lean years, certainly very lean months in between where we did not have that funding come in. But once we did have that whale, we were able to go ahead and start branching out and build out the broader set of the product suite. So for us, it was really about just making that early customer a high-paying customer, and then being able to scale from there.
Cool. So my story is a little different. I'm still in the early stages of business. So we hired our first engineer in June of 2016. And the reason why it took us a really long time to build that product was one of the things was I was still working a full-time job. I was actually working a full-time job until February of 2019. So I kind of did it on the side. And as soon as I quit my full-time job to really dedicate myself to the business, I actually moved home with my mom. So I still live at home with my mom. And I live in the basement, and I still don't make a salary. So it's the struggle you always hear about of not paying yourself and, doing the grind. That's literally what I'm doing now is I'm just grinding away, and, I can see the light. So you keep pushing yourself to kind of get there.
Well, kudos to you. I just like to offer to buy you dinner anytime, if that'll help at all. I remember the last business that I started, there was an awful lot of craft dinner and puff rice for a lot of years. Maybe a couple of questions about developers. We've got several questions about developers. So how do you find good developers? Several people asked about, using Upwork. How did you find the right people? Was it kind of trial and error or referrals or what?
So I use a lot of Upwork. I kind of have a system that I use now. Upwork's pretty good in allowing you to use a lot of filters. So I filter by, certain countries that I know have good people that speak proper English, that are skilled. To be quite frank, I've hired to date 7 engineers, and I've had to let go of 3 of them. So it's really trial and error. I try to do my best, and you learn along the way of how to find the right people. One of the things that we do now is we provide cognitive assessments to all our employees, and they must reach a certain level to kind of pass on to the final round. So they to show that they're quick learners, that they understand how to use computers. So we do have those tools that I've kind of developed along the way, but it is trial and error. I've made a lot of mistakes, and you kind of learn along the way. If you guys want, feel free to reach out to me because I can kind of dive a little deeper into some of those things that I look for. I'm happy to provide you the assessments that we provide to our candidates as well.
That's great. Sam, you want to comment a little bit?
Yeah, I guess, PE, we're kind of fortunate that one of my co-founders, Amit, met a really strong technologist. He's kind of the backbone of our development. I also think he's a really tough role model to follow. He's a brilliant guy, and not a lot of people measure up to kind of his capacity to build great and glorious code. So props to him for that. But I also think he sets a really good standard for anybody coming into the organization. He ends up becoming a great sounding board for anybody who does want to come and do some cool things with us. He does, a fairly technical evaluation as we go through, candidates. But I also think that there's another intrinsic thing that we look for, and it's not easy. It is, as Andy said, trial and error. There's a number of ways that we go and try and source candidates. But what we're really looking for, aside from the technical capacity, is just a passion to learn. And I think this is one of the big differentiators of those that succeed at PaymentEvolution and those that don't find their way, to be quite honest. So, passion for us is a big differentiator, and it's not something that you're able to interview a lot for. You can ask some really good probing questions, but for us, it's kind of the first 90 days. Are you seeing some of that come through? Are you stretching? Are you going beyond kind of the task that you have at hand? And that's a great leading indicator for us on the long-term success of a technical member of our team.
We've got lots more questions here, but I want to be sensitive to people's time. So I'm going to say thank you to both Sam and Andy for the event today. I would also say that we're recording this event, and it will be posted on the RIC Centre website pretty soon. So you can go back there and have a look and listen again if there's any. We're super impactful for you. And finally, this is the final event in the current tranche of the E2E COVID Survival Toolkit. So if you're new to the startup ecosystem and you're looking for support, reach out to us, register with the RIC Centre, or email me directly at paul.barter@riccentre.com. And finally, we're going to ask a little favor of you folks. Jenny's going to launch a wrap-up poll in just a second, and if you could just take a minute and do the poll, it'll tell us a little bit about what we should do next, and as we do future events, where the potential highest value for you would be. So having said that, please do the poll. And one more time, thank you so much to Sam and Andy. Really appreciate your feedback. I know we've got lots of startups in the RIC Centre ecosystem that have bootstrapped to scale, and it's good to hear your stories as well. Thank you again. Great work.
Thanks, everyone.